The cemetery was quieter than usual that morning. The wind moved softly through rows of stone, brushing fallen leaves into gentle spirals before letting them scatter. Birds perched on the branches of old oaks, their songs muted as if the weight of the ground beneath them demanded reverence. Most of the graves carried names chiseled deep, dates framed by dashes, short inscriptions that tried to compress lifetimes into single lines. Yet scattered among them were others markers without names, just numbers, or in some cases, no words at all. Few people visited those corners. Families came to graves they could recognize, to places where memory and inscription matched. The unmarked plots received little more than the occasional flower from a passing hand, gestures of pity rather than connection. Their silence was heavier, their loneliness more profound. That was where he walked. The tomb guard entered without fanfare, dressed plainly, but carrying with him the unmistakable discipline of duty. His shoulders squared even on the uneven ground, his eyes steady despite the weight of memory pressing in from all sides. Visitors recognized him instantly, some with hushed whispers, others with awe. For most, he was a figure only seen in the solemn rituals at the National Memorial, guarding the unknown soldier with a stillness that felt eternal. To see him here, among ordinary stones and forgotten earth, was jarring and sacred at once. His steps led him past the more decorated graves, past the names and wreaths, until he reached a corner where the stones were bare and weathered, some tilting as though the ground itself had forgotten to hold them upright. He carried a bundle of flowers, not the lavish kind bought for display, but simple white lilies bound with twine. There, before one that bore no inscription at all, he stopped. The crowd followed at a respectful distance, unsure whether to approach. A woman paused with her son, whispering, "Why there?" "There's no name." The boy frowned, tugging at her hand. Too young to understand the weight of absence. The guard knelt slowly, carefully, as though lowering himself onto sacred ground. He brushed the dirt from the base of the stone, his gloved hand moving with reverence. Then, without ceremony, he laid the lilies across the grave. The plaza of silence that opened then was deeper than the quiet of the cemetery itself. Even the birds seemed to pause. The simple act of placing flowers on an unmarked grave done by a man known for standing immovable in the presence of sacrifice felt heavier than speeches, heavier than anthems. People began to gather, drawn by something they could not name. A veteran in a faded cap removed it, pressing it against his chest. A young couple lowered their cameras, ashamed of having tried to capture the moment too quickly. Children hushed one another, sensing that something sacred was happening. The guard remained kneeling for a long moment, head bowed. His silence was not empty. It filled the air like a held breath, as if every forgotten name pressed closer, asking to be remembered through him. When at last he rose, his hand lingered on the stone. He stood as though keeping watch over it, as he did over the tomb itself. Whispers rippled through the onlookers. "Why this grave? Does he know whose it is? It's unmarked. Is it even a soldier's?" The guard gave no answer. His face revealed nothing, his eyes fixed on the stone as though it contained more than letters could. For the people who watched, it was both mystery and revelation. The act itself said what no inscription could, that even the nameless deserve remembrance, that silence does not erase worth. But beneath the surface of that gesture, there was more truth not yet revealed, a story that tied this forgotten plot to lives still breathing. The reason the guard had chosen this grave, the identity hidden beneath it, would soon come to light, and when it did, it would leave not just the witnesses in tears, but the nation itself. For now, the flowers rested quietly on the unmarked stone, white against the gray, like a promise waiting to be spoken. The lilies rested quietly on the unmarked grave, their white petals trembling in the wind. For long minutes no one moved, as if the entire cemetery had been caught in the gravity of that single gesture. The tomb guard stood motionless, his hand still lingering on the rough surface of the stone. His silence carried a weight that pressed into everyone watching. It was a cemetery caretaker who finally broke the hush. Bent with age and leaning on a shovel, he shuffled forward, squinting at the gathering of people. "Strange, isn't it?" he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "So many passed this one by. Yet he chose it. Who grave is it?" a young man asked. "There's no name," the caretaker sighed, his shoulders sagging under memory. "That's the tragedy. This grave has no marker because the man buried here was never claimed. No family came. No one to pay for an inscription. For decades, it's been just another stone among many." The crowd stirred uneasily. The idea of a life reduced to anonymity, of a soldier's sacrifice hidden beneath silence, tightened throats and pricked eyes. The tomb guard finally spoke, his voice low but resonant, carrying easily across the gathered people. He was not unclaimed. The caretaker turned, startled. "You know?" The guard's gaze did not waver from the stone. "I know." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Phones rose again, not out of disrespect but out of the need to remember. Something important was about to be revealed. The guard stepped back slightly, giving the grave room, as though the man beneath deserved space to speak for himself. Then, slowly, he began. "He was Corporal Daniel Reeves. He served in the same unit as my mentor, decades ago. They fought together in a battle that few survived. Reeves was mortally wounded but refused evacuation, insisting that others be carried out first. When the fighting ended, his body was recovered, but no family could be found. Records were lost, addresses outdated, and so he was buried here, nameless, as though his sacrifice had dissolved into the soil." The weight of the story pressed tears into eyes already brimming. The guard continued, his voice steady but threaded with emotion. "My mentor never forgot him. He told me stories of Reeves's courage, his laughter, the way he carried hope even in the darkest nights. When my mentor died, he made me promise to find Reeves, to remember him. It took years. Records scattered, names misplaced, but I found him here under this stone, unmarked, unvisited." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Today I fulfilled that promise." The crowd was silent, but for the sound of muffled sobs. A veteran in the group saluted sharply, his hand trembling. A woman clutched her chest, whispering, "All these years." Children, too young to understand fully, looked up at their parents, sensing the gravity of the moment. The caretaker wiped his eyes with a rough hand. "All this time, we thought he was forgotten. No one is forgotten. That while we stand, not while we stand, not while we remember." A ripple moved through the gathering, not of noise but of conviction. Strangers reached for one another's hands. Some knelt beside the grave, pressing fingers into the dirt as if to anchor themselves to the man who had lain unseen for so long. Then something remarkable happened. One by one, people began placing flowers of their own on the grave. A single red rose, a sprig of wild daisies, a folded note written quickly on the back of a receipt. The mound grew, white lilies surrounded by bursts of color, each offering a promise that Reeves would no longer lie alone. Photos of the unmarked grave, now overflowing with flowers, appeared across social media. Headlines told the story. Tomb guard reveals identity of forgotten soldier. Veterans groups organized vigils. Schools shared Reeves's story in classrooms, students reciting his name as if giving back the life history the stone had denied him. Days later, the government announced that a proper headstone would be placed. It would read, "Corporal Daniel Reeves' beloved son, brother, soldier, no longer forgotten." When the stone was unveiled, thousands attended. Families who had lost their own gathered shoulder to shoulder, whispering their loved ones' names as Reeves's was spoken aloud. The guard stood silently among them, not in the front, not seeking recognition, but blended into the crowd. His promise was complete. The truth of that day traveled far beyond the cemetery. It reminded the nation, and eventually the world, that remembrance is not a matter of ground monuments alone. It is in the act of seeing the unseen, of naming the nameless, of laying flowers on a grave no one else visits. And though Corporal Reeves had lain unmarked for decades, the guard's gesture ensured that he would never again be forgotten. His name, once hidden, now lived in classrooms, in headlines, in whispered prayers at dinner tables. The unmarked grave had become the most visited in the cemetery, not because it was famous, but because it had been remembered. The guard returned, as always, to his post at the tomb. Tourists and mourners alike came, some whispering Reeves's name as they passed, others laying flowers not only at the marble steps, but at the silent corners of cemeteries everywhere. The story had spread. If one man could be rescued from anonymity, perhaps all could. The lesson lingered, sharper than stone, brighter than flame. Memory is not passive. It must be carried, spoken, laid down like lilies on forgotten ground. And sometimes it takes one man silent, steadfast, unyielding to remind the world that no sacrifice is ever truly unclaimed.